Welcome, middle schoolers. Last time I introduced the ways scientists learn about the world around them. If you haven't watched that video, please follow the link in the description and view the first video before continuing. So, what did you learn from that video? What was your biggest takeaway? Take about 2 minutes, think to yourself, and write down your answer to this question. Now that you've taken the time to remember and reflect, let's review the three major skills discussed in that video. So what were they? Do you remember? If not, that's okay. Here they are again. Remember that I asked you to wonder like a scientist, I asked you to investigate like a scientist, and to communicate like a scientist, but better. Now, I'd like you to pause and take a minute to try and define each of these and provide an example for each of them. Again, this is your own definition, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Go ahead and pause the video to write down your definitions and your examples. So, I hope that you took the time to write your definitions and your examples. Now we're going to kind of talk about those a little bit. Okay, so here's some definitions and examples that I came up with, and it's okay if yours is different. Mine are not perfect. I did not copy them from any dictionary. I just came up with them myself. So it's totally okay if yours are different as long as they're somewhat similar. So when you wonder, that's when you want to know something. Okay, so wondering is just wanting to know something. So an example would be, I wonder how far away the North Star is. When you investigate, you study something or you would inquire about it, and you often use a particular method. Okay, so it's just examining something using a particular method. For example, you can investigate by doing an experiment using the scientific method. And I can talk more about the scientific method in another video, although there's plenty of great videos out there already about the scientific method. Finally, when you communicate like a scientist, you're giving your knowledge to somebody else. And for example, you can communicate by creating a poster that explains how climate change works. So I hope you have a good idea of what each of these means, because this is something you're going to use for the entire time you're in science class, okay? And hopefully even past science class, I hope that you take these skills and you apply them to other parts of your life. I used the word phenomenon, the plural being phenomena, in the last video, and I wanted to make sure that we all understood what that word means. It's kind of a strange, long word, and it actually has multiple definitions. The first definition is the easiest to understand in my opinion, and that's just an observable fact or event. That's a phenomenon. Really easy to understand. I also like 2C because it specifically mentions science. So 2C, a fact or event of scientific interest susceptible, that means it's kind of, science can be used on it, right? Susceptible to scientific description and explanation. So basically, an observable fact or event that's interesting to scientists, okay? So as we go forward, when I use the word phenomenon, I'm talking about something we can observe in the natural world that we might have a scientific interest in. I don't know about you, but I am bored with talking about what scientists do, so let's take some time to practice what I've been preaching. We're going to start out small, and this will probably be a pretty easy research project. Going forward, we're going to do more difficult investigations. We're going to create and test models. We'll write longer communications. But let's start with something a bit easier and build up from there. So let's take a look at this description. So you're going to create a wonder statement from one natural phenomenon of your choice. You're then going to investigate and communicate your findings with a 1-slide, 2 minutes max, probably less than that, presentation. And if you're in my class, your peers will get the chance to ask you questions about your presentation, and then you're going to try your best to answer those questions. So let's take a closer look at this project. So I've created a list of some interesting phenomena for you to choose from, and you can just pick whichever one you like best. There are some really fun ones on the list, like our bodies can fight infections using special blood cells, plants didn't always live on land, some stars appear brighter than others, menthol makes water seem cold, different chemicals burn in different colors, some theropods, which were dinosaurs, had feathers and can fly, magnets can attract objects they aren't touching. So whatever you like, if you're more into the chemistry or the physical science or space, earth, biology, whatever you like, you can pick that and use that to create your wonder statement from. If there's a different phenomenon that you want to look at that's not on the list, just approve it with the teacher first. Go ahead and pause the video and pick your favorite phenomenon. Okay, now it's time to create your I wonder statement. This should be based on the phenomenon you chose. For example, let's say I noticed that old people have wrinkles, but young people don't. My I wonder statement would sound something like this. I wonder what causes wrinkles in old age. Pause the video again and write down your I wonder statement. Okay, let's move on to step 2. So it's time to investigate. For this investigation, we won't do a science experiment. Instead, you're going to do some research online. You can also make observations if that works for your phenomenon. You should use more than one resource for your investigation. I have this huge list of Mrs. Mathis approved resources here for you to check out. When you're done with your research, you'll probably have even more questions, and you really should write these down as you think of them. Finally, it's time to communicate. You're going to create a single slide presentation, and this should include your I wonder statement. It should include your resources, 5 complete sentences communicating what you learned, a picture that fits the topic, and 1 question you had while or after you were doing your research. Now let's take a look at some examples I created so that you know what to do. So I'm going to start with the best example, and then we'll work back from there. So remember, on the slide, you need to have your I wonder statement. I put this at the top so it's very clear to see. I wonder what causes wrinkles in old age. You also have to either explain how you investigated your question or just indicate your resources. I did this by putting a little heading, resources, and then I listed the 3 resources I used. Remember, you need to use more than one, but you can use as many as you want, as long as you can communicate your findings in 1 slide. And here I have 5 complete sentences that communicate what I learned. You can write these in paragraph form too, but sometimes it's easier on a slide to see them if they're in bullet form. It kind of depends how long your paragraph is. But I do want those to be complete sentences. That's part of the communication skills. You should know how to write in complete sentences. You don't have to fully answer your question, just try your best. Now, I also included this picture that fits the topic, and I want you to notice this picture is something maybe you could see in a textbook. It's very informative. It doesn't have to look like a textbook picture, but whatever picture you choose should give some information. It shouldn't just be a fun picture you found. And I made my new question in a separate box, which was, how do so-called anti-aging serums and creams work? Okay, so this is what I'm looking for from you. It's neat, You can see all the information. It includes everything I want. It's informative and it's to the point. Okay, so here's an okay example. So it has the I wonder statement. It's very clear to see. Rather than having the resources heading, this one just writes a little bit about how the investigation happened. Maybe this one writes about it too much, spent too much time on it. It's kind of boring. Not everybody wants to know exactly how you researched, right? And then it has at least five complete sentences communicating what was learned, but it's kind of hard to read here. There's a lot of, it's in paragraph form. Doesn't look any different from the resources part. It's kind of lengthy. It's not to the point. There's a picture, and it does fit the topic because it's of Ms. Lakshmi, who looks very young for her age, and she doesn't have a lot of wrinkles. So it's kind of related to the topic, but it's not really informative, right? It doesn't say anything about collagen, elastin, fat, hydration, or any of the things that I had talked about. And it doesn't necessarily have to show the molecules, but there should be something about it, right? And the one new question is at the end of the paragraph, so it's kind of hard to see. It's not separated, but it is there. So it's not well organized. The image isn't very informational, and this is an okay slide. It meets the basic requirements, but I do expect better of you, and I want to see better communication skills. So next we're going to look at a bad example. Okay, so it has an I wonder statement, but the I wonder statement is terrible. I wonder how they happen. That is not a good I wonder statement, even with the wrinkles part in front. Okay, you need to make sure it's all one sentence and it's very clear. So even if they wrote, I wonder how wrinkles happen, that would be better, but it wouldn't be the best. Okay, the reason why, the way I had it stated before, I wonder what causes wrinkles is better, is because when you say, I wonder how wrinkles happen, I could talk about how long they take. I could talk about, all the different causes. I could talk about the process of wrinkles forming. It's just too broad. If I say, I wonder what causes wrinkles, I'm looking for something specific. That's a really good I wonder statement. The next thing you'll notice right away is that instead of giving clear references, I just wrote, I used Google for my investigation. Oh boy. If you ever use Google as a reference, your teacher will be so sad. Google is not a reference. Google is a search engine. You can use Google to find references, but then you have to cite those references. And again, if you're in doubt, use one of the references from my list. Those are all pretty good. Okay? And I only wrote 2 sentences about my findings instead of the 5. And again, they're very kind of vague. They aren't very clear. I just wrote that collagens and elastin make it look young. I didn't explain how. I didn't explain why. At least in the first slide, I said something about skin tightness, and I showed a picture that explained a little bit about how they work. And then the next thing I wrote was just when you get older, there's less collagen and elastin. And we know that there's so much more to it, right? In the first slide, I talked about UV rays and smoking and stress and toxins, whatever. So I would expect a little more detail here. Now, the final part, the question, is still good on this slide, but the rest of it isn't that great. So the I wonder how anti-aging creams work, that one's fine. The picture, again, not informative, very similar to the last one where it's just, okay, we see some people who are older and they have wrinkles, but it doesn't tell us anything about what causes wrinkles. Okay, so I hope that this made it a little bit more clear. And if you have any questions about this project, make sure you ask the teacher because that's what we're here for. I'd like to leave you with this quote. In every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks. John Muir was a very important American conservationist who helped Theodore Roosevelt establish the national parks. Today, these national parks like Yellowstone, Glacier, Yosemite, Arches, and the Everglades, and more help protect the beauty, wildlife, and heritage of America. What I personally take away from this quote is that the natural world around us is full of exciting things to observe and discover if we just slow down and really look and appreciate it. So until next time, pay attention to the world around you and stay curious, kiddos.